The store clerk looked me dead in the eye and said, "We don't serve your kind here." But what happened next when the CEO walked in changed. Everything I thought I knew about assumptions and first impressions. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. My name is Zelda Hartwell. I'm 67 years old, a retired Air Force colonel, and until 3 months ago, I was married to my best friend Walter for 42 incredible years. After he passed, I found myself doing things I never thought I'd do alone. That Saturday afternoon in Phoenix, I walked into Patriot Arms and Sporting Goods wearing my favorite floral dress and pearl earrings that Walter had given me for our 20th anniversary. I looked exactly like what I am, a grandmother who bakes cookies for church fundraisers and keeps family photos in her purse. But I also had my military ID in my wallet. 25 years of service to this country in my background, and a very specific mission that day. My grandson Finn had just turned 21, and he'd been talking about wanting to learn hunting from his grandfather before Walter got sick. Since Walter couldn't teach him anymore, I decided I would buy Finn his first hunting rifle and learn alongside him. It seemed like a way to honor Walter's memory while creating new traditions with our grandson. I had no idea that walking into that store would turn into a battle I hadn't fought since my early days in the military, when I had to prove I belonged in a man's world every single day. I thought those days were behind me. I thought earning my rank and serving my country had settled the question of whether I deserved respect. I was wrong. What happened in that gun store wasn't just about one rude employee or one moment of discrimination. It was about how quickly people make assumptions based on what they see, and how those assumptions can strip away everything you've worked for in a matter of seconds. But it was also about what happens when someone recognizes your true worth, and how that recognition can change not just your day, but your entire perspective on your own value. The clerk's name was Braden, and he was probably 25 years old with tattoos covering both arms and an attitude that suggested he owned the place. The CEO was Camden Phillips, a man I'd never met but who would remind me of something I'd forgotten about myself. My grandson Finn was at home, completely unaware that his birthday gift would become the center of a confrontation that would challenge everything I thought I knew about standing up for myself as a woman, as a veteran, and as someone who refuses to be invisible just because I'm getting older. This is the story of how a simple shopping trip became a reminder that respect isn't automatically given based on age or politeness, but it can be earned in ways you never expect. It's about what happens when you refuse to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable, and how sometimes the people who see your worth are the ones you least expect to defend you. What I learned that day changed how I see myself and how I move through the world. It reminded me that my service didn't end when I retired, and that sometimes the most important battles happen in the most ordinary places. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before that day at the gun store. Because context matters when you're trying to understand how someone can go from invisible to vindicated in the span of 30 minutes. 3 months earlier, I had buried my husband Walter after watching cancer take him piece by piece over 18 months. We had met when I was a young lieutenant and he was a staff sergeant at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. He used to joke that I outranked him from day one, but he never seemed to mind. Walter saw my strength before I fully understood it myself. He watched me navigate a military career when women had to work twice as hard for half the recognition, and he cheered every promotion, every deployment, every challenge I conquered. After his funeral, I found myself rattling around our house in suburban Phoenix like a marble in a shoebox. The silence was deafening. My daughter lives in Seattle with her own busy life, and my son is stationed in Germany. They call regularly, but I could hear the worry in their voices when they asked how I was doing. I started saying I was fine even when I wasn't, because I didn't want to become their obligation. That's when I decided I needed to learn things I had always depended on Walter for. Home repairs, car maintenance, and yes, firearms. During my military service, I was an expert marksman with standard-issue weapons, but civilian firearms were Walter's hobby, not mine. Since his passing, I had been researching personal protection options online, reading reviews, watching YouTube videos. I wanted to be self-sufficient, not just another helpless widow waiting for her children to rescue her. When Finn called to thank me for his birthday card, he mentioned how much he missed talking guns and hunting with Grandpa Walter. He said he wished he could learn to hunt before starting his new job, but didn't know where to begin without Walter's guidance. That conversation planted an idea that grew into a plan. I would buy Finn a quality hunting rifle for his 21st birthday, and we would learn together. It felt like a way to honor Walter while building a new relationship with our grandson. I spent 2 weeks researching beginner-friendly hunting rifles, reading specifications, comparing prices. I printed out articles and made notes like I was preparing for a military briefing. I wanted to walk into that store knowledgeable and confident, not some confused old lady asking for help with everything. Saturday afternoon, I dressed carefully in my favorite floral dress, the one Walter always said brought out my eyes. I wore my pearl earrings and carried my small leather purse, the same one I'd carried to church and family dinners for years. I looked exactly like what I was, a grandmother who probably had butterscotch candies and tissues in her purse. But I also had my research, my military ID, and a clear mission. Patriot Arms and Sporting Goods was intimidating from the moment I walked through the doors. The store was massive, filled with tactical displays, camouflage gear, and serious-looking equipment. Country music played overhead, and the air smelled like leather and gun oil. Most of the customers were men in work boots and baseball caps, talking in low voices about hunting seasons and ammunition. I felt like I was wearing a sign that said, "Doesn't belong here," but I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the firearms counter. Anyway, I approached the firearms counter with the confidence that comes from preparation. I had my research, my budget, and a clear idea of what I wanted for Finn. What I didn't expect was to be treated like an intruder in my own country's retail establishment. Behind the counter stood Braden, a young man in his mid-20s with elaborate tattoos covering both arms and an expression that suggested customer service was beneath him. He was helping another customer select ammunition, speaking in technical terms that clearly demonstrated his knowledge. I waited politely, hands folded, until their conversation concluded. "Excuse me," I said with the same respectful tone I'd used in military briefings for 25 years. "I'd like to look at some rifles for my grandson's 21st birthday. Something appropriate for a beginning hunter." Braden barely glanced in my direction before turning back to organize boxes behind the counter. "Ma'am, maybe you'd be more comfortable at the garden center next door. They have nice gift cards." I felt my cheeks warm but maintained my composure. "Thank you, but I'm specifically looking for a hunting rifle. I've researched several models and would like to compare them in person." This time he did look at me, and I didn't like what I saw in his eyes. It was the same dismissive look I remembered from my early military days when male colleagues assumed I was someone's secretary instead of their commanding officer. "Look, lady, these aren't toys. You could seriously hurt someone if you don't know what you're doing. Maybe your son should come in and handle this for you." The condescension in his voice made my jaw tighten. Other customers were starting to notice our exchange, and I could feel their stares. "Young man, I'm perfectly capable of making this purchase myself. I'd like to see a Remington 700 or similar bolt-action rifle in .308 caliber." Braden's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. "Oh, so you know some gun words. That doesn't mean you understand ballistics or safety protocols. Do you even know what caliber means, or did you just Google it this morning?" The insult hit its mark because there was just enough truth in it to sting. I had spent hours researching online, trying to educate myself quickly about something Walter had decades to learn. But I also had 25 years of military training that this young man knew nothing about. "I'd like to speak with your manager," I said firmly. Braden's voice grew louder, ensuring nearby customers could hear every word. "Ma'am, we don't have time to babysit customers who don't know what they're doing. This isn't a place for little old ladies to wander around confused." The words "little old lady" hit me like a physical blow. I had commanded squadrons, made life and death decisions, earned the respect of soldiers half my age. But standing there in my floral dress with my carefully curled gray hair, I realized that none of that mattered to this young man who saw only what he expected to see. "Listen, Grandma," Braden continued, his voice carrying across the store. "We don't serve your kind here. This is for serious shooters, not people playing dress-up. You need to leave before you embarrass yourself further." Something shifted inside me when Braden said those words. Maybe it was muscle memory from all those years when I had to prove I belonged in rooms full of men who thought I was there by mistake. Maybe it was grief over Walter, who would have been furious to see me treated this way. Or maybe it was just the stubborn streak that got me through flight school when instructors told me women didn't have what it takes to be pilots. Whatever it was, I felt my spine straighten and my voice drop to the tone I used when addressing subordinates who had forgotten their place. "I am not leaving," I said, loud enough for everyone in the immediate area to hear. "I'd like to see your manager immediately. This level of customer service is completely unacceptable." Braden's smirk faltered slightly, but he recovered quickly. "Fine, Trevor," he called to a man in his 30s restocking shelves nearby. "Can you deal with this difficult customer?" Trevor approached with the weary expression of someone accustomed to handling complaints. He looked me up and down, clearly seeing exactly what Braden saw, an elderly woman who didn't belong. "Ma'am, I understand there's been some confusion. If you're having trouble understanding our products, maybe this isn't the right store for your needs. We cater to experienced customers with specific requirements." The diplomatic language couldn't mask the same condescending attitude. 2 against 1 now, both men united in their certainty that I was the problem. "There's no confusion on my part," I replied. "I've been treated with disrespect and discrimination based solely on assumptions about my age and gender. This is not how veterans should be treated anywhere in America, let alone in a store that profits from selling weapons." Trevor's expression shifted slightly at the word veteran, but skepticism remained. "Ma'am, a lot of people claim military service. If you were actually in the service, you'd understand that firearms require serious knowledge and training. That did it. 25 years of swallowing my pride and proving myself to men who looked just like these two came flooding back. I opened my wallet and pulled out my retired military ID, holding it up so both men could see it clearly. "I served this country for 25 years, I said, my voice carrying across the store. "I've handled weapons you've probably never seen. I'm not asking for charity or special treatment. I'm asking for basic respect as a paying customer." Braden leaned over to examine my ID, his expression mocking. "Anyone can get one of those made at the mall." "Prove it. What was your MOs? What bases were you stationed at? What aircraft did you work on?" He was testing me, expecting me to fumble or admit I was lying. Instead, I rattled off my military occupational specialty, my duty stations, and technical specifications about the F-16 Fighting Falcon that I had worked with for over a decade. I mentioned weapon systems, deployment locations, and military protocols with the precision that comes from years of briefings and training. The store had grown quieter around us. Other customers were openly staring now, some pulling out phones. The confrontation had escalated beyond a simple customer service issue into something much more significant. Just as Braden opened his mouth to challenge my military knowledge further, I heard a calm voice behind me say, "Excuse me, what's going on here?" I turned to see a man in his mid-40s wearing khakis and a polo shirt, carrying himself with the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to command. He wasn't particularly tall or intimidating, but something about his presence made the entire area go quiet. "Mr. Phillips," Braden's voice cracked slightly. "We didn't know you were coming in today. This lady is causing problems and claims to be former military, but she's clearly just trying to get attention. Camden Phillips." I recognized the name from the corporate information displayed near the front entrance. The owner of the entire chain, standing 3 feet away from me, observing a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. "Ma'am," he said, turning to me with a respectful nod that neither of his employees had offered. "I'm Camden Phillips, owner of this company. Could you please tell me what happened here?" Before I could respond, Trevor jumped in. "Sir, she's been disruptive and demanding special treatment. When we explained our policies about customer expertise, she became belligerent and started making false claims about military service." Camden held up one hand to silence Trevor, never taking his eyes off me. "Ma'am, I'd like to hear your version." I explained everything, from Braden's initial dismissal to Trevor's condescending backup, to the challenge about my military credentials. Camden listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding as I described specific incidents. When I finished, he asked quietly, "May I see your military ID?" I handed it to him and watched his expression change as he studied it carefully. Unlike his employees, he wasn't looking for ways to discredit it. He was reading it with the attention of someone who understood what it represented. "Colonel Hartwell," he said, his voice carrying new weight on my rank. "You served with the 12th Fighter Wing under Colonel Martinez, didn't you?" "Davis-Monthan Air Force Base?" My heart nearly stopped. Yes, sir. How did you know that? I was Captain Phillips, 15th Maintenance Squadron. We crossed paths several times during Operation Desert Shield. You probably don't remember me, but I remember you. You gave a briefing about aircraft readiness that probably saved lives during my deployment. The store had gone completely silent. Braden's face had turned white, and I could see other customers straining to hear our conversation. Camden turned to face his employees, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had built a business empire and wasn't about to watch it be destroyed by ignorance. Gentlemen, this is Colonel Zelda Hartwell, United States Air Force, retired. She has served our country with distinction and honor. The treatment she received here today is not just unacceptable customer service, it's a disgrace to everything this company claims to stand for. He looked directly at Braden. You're fired. Clean out your locker and leave immediately. Then to me. Colonel, would you allow me the honor of personally helping you find the perfect rifle for your grandson? What happened next felt like stepping into an alternate reality where respect was the default instead of something I had to fight for. Camden personally walked me through their entire rifle selection, sharing stories about his own military service while treating me with the dignity I should have received from the beginning. We discussed the merits of different calibers for beginning hunters, compared bolt-action versus semi-automatic options, and talked about proper scope selection. He answered every question I had researched online with patience and expertise, never once making me feel foolish for asking. When we settled on a beautiful Remington 700 in .308 caliber, Camden insisted on applying the full military discount and included professional engraving of Finn's name at no charge. As we completed the paperwork, he shared that his own son was about Finn's age and understood the importance of creating new traditions after loss. Colonel, he said as he prepared my receipt, I want you to know that what happened here today will never happen again in any of my stores. I'm implementing company-wide training about recognizing and respecting military service members and veterans. Would you consider speaking at our first training session? I was speechless for a moment. 3 hours earlier, I had been invisible and dismissed. Now I was being asked to help shape company policy and train employees about respect and recognition. But the real transformation happened when I gave Finn his rifle 2 weeks later at his birthday dinner. As I told him the story of what happened at the gun store, I watched his expression change from embarrassment about his grandmother being mistreated to pride in who I was and what I had accomplished. Grandma, he said, running his hand along the engraved stock, I had no idea you were such a badass. My daughter laughed and said, Your grandmother has always been a badass, honey. Sometimes people just need reminding. That comment stuck with me for weeks afterward. I realized I had spent the months since Walter's death trying to shrink myself, to become less of a burden, to take up less space in the world. The incident at the gun store forced me to remember that my life experience, my military service, and my knowledge have value that doesn't diminish with age. Camden and I stayed in touch after that day. He invited me to speak at 3 different employee training sessions, where I shared stories about military service and talked about the importance of treating every customer with initial respect, regardless of appearance or assumptions. Several employees thanked me afterward, saying they had never considered how their preconceptions might affect their interactions with customers. 6 months later, Finn and I took that rifle on our first hunting trip together. He didn't get anything that weekend, but we spent hours talking about Grandpa Walter, about military service, and about standing up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable. That day at the gun store taught me that respect isn't automatically given based on age or appearance, but it can be earned by refusing to accept anything less. Sometimes the most important battles happen in the most ordinary places, and sometimes standing up for yourself opens doors you never expected to walk through.